Hello, good evening. So great to see so many people here. I would like to welcome you to the first in a series of teaser events that we'll be doing for EventLAB. EventLAB is a live experience that we'll be hosting for event bookers later on this year. The EventLAB program will be focused on discovery and learning in the modern events industry. In true higher space fashion, we will be taking an unbiased look at the state of the events industry in 2017 and beyond. We'll be drawing on a broad range of influential industry voices, always aiming for passionate and insightful debate, which we will no doubt be experiencing here in the next hour. So if anyone would like to know more about EventLAB, could you please come and see Felicity, who will put her hand up here. She is the EventLAB producer, and she'll be able to give you some more information. So have a chat to her after the discussion. We'd also like to thank CodeNode and Natalie and Eva, who are sat over here. If you could put your hands up, great. And they will be on hand after the discussion to answer any questions about the venue and also give you a tour if anyone wants to have a look around. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Emma Hudson, who will be the moderator for this evening, and she will introduce this extremely impressive panelist of speakers, and please enjoy the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Is that working? Yeah. Good. So welcome to this panel talking about the future of events. I'm just going to introduce the panel now. So to my right, we have Emma Howe from Street Feast and London Union. We have Julian Saipe from Zafferano, Adele de Fontbrune, did I pronounce that correctly? From The Arrangers, Richard Groves from Smart Group, and Caleb Parker from the HBAA. Welcome, everyone. So first and foremost, we discussed it a bit in our chat before this panel, but why don't we talk a bit about the definition of an event in today's world in 2017. Julian, maybe you can talk to us about how do you define an event in 2017?
Well, I was the one that raised this issue of the definition of an event. I was the one that... Can you hear me now? Before the panel this evening, I addressed the issue of what is an event, the definition of an event, because in our this evening discussion, there was an immediate assumption that the events that we were talking about were public events, that they had large footfall, that footfall could be amplified with social media messages and that sort of thing. And the events that I grew up with were private events. They were private parties. They were regulated in the sense that there was a head count, a guest number, a guest list. There was security. They were often product launches where we'd signed a non-disclosure agreement and no one should know about them. So from that point of view, the event was very much, in terms of its, for example, social media resonance, it was a closed shop. So just for this evening's purpose, just to be clear, when we're talking about events, are we talking about festivals? Are we talking about conferences? Are we talking about parties? What do we understand? What is an event? Because I judged the event awards recently, and there was an award for an event which was an installation, and that ran for 6 weeks, and that was considered an event. So I just think the term event has evolved, and the events, again, that I grew up with were very spontaneous. It was very much about the live impact at the show, in inverted commas, as opposed to a conversation that you were having before or after or even during. It was very much about, it was a live experience. And I'll say a little bit later about the danger of how tech can undermine experiential.
And on this panel, we have a really great range of event professionals represented who work across both corporate and public events. So Emma, a lot of what London Union and Street Feast do, they do mix public events, but also corporate events. So how does your company, or how do you define an event?
Hello. So we're actually really new to the events industry. We've only been sort of doing events the last 18 months. And I think where, we've sort of been so busy over the last 18 months is where people are looking for something different and they're looking for an experience. I don't know if anyone's familiar with any of our venues here. They're very relaxed. They're really, really informal. We take over derelict spaces. It's street food. It's very, very casual. And we've had a huge uptake on that, and we're sort of working across a range of events. But in terms of defining what an actual event is for us, it's a tricky one, because we do the public events, we do private events. We're working with some really big brands that, there's confidentiality agreements in place. They don't want you talking about their event. But then we do other events where we're literally splashed all across the web and social media as well.
I'd also like to talk about visitor empowerment, which is the first kind of main question that we're going to look at. How do you empower visitors, and what does visitor empowerment even mean? Not to get really semantic, but we're going to talk about definitions a lot on this panel. So Richard, what does visitor empowerment mean to you?
What I believe it to mean is the engagement of the people that are there. The reason I come from the same old school catering background as Julian does, of putting events into the National Gallery or the Victoria and Albert Museum, those sort of big spaces that people were held statement events at. And as Julian said, they're closed. The guest list, you don't tell anybody about it, and the least that the public know that these people are having an event there, as far as the country's concerned, the better. But now, experiential is so important, and people are trying to push the boundaries on their event, and because everybody can watch YouTube, everybody can stream events from around the world, and they can see things immediately as a global community rather than just a community in a room. That is, I think, where the empowerment is coming from, because you've got your 400 people in a room, and now you're not looking just for return on investment from that room and those 400 people. You're actually looking at return on experience, which is what are those people taking away with them, and how can you push the boundary from that room out past the concrete walls through to a global market and get more engagement from people with the content initially before the event, but then expand on the message that's coming out of that event of how it's going to affect people in their business or in their personal life or in their social media, and then that then is a tangible takeaway from the event rather than just everybody standing in a room either hearing a speech or conference content, having a meal and then going away, and those 400 people trapping that experience with just a very tangible short-term nature of the event. This will, the extension of it and the empowerment of people to get involved and to either agree on content to begin with or contribute as the whole event goes on across the world. You could have 400 people in one room, you could have 4 million people joining in on the conversation, and that's empowering people so much further than they ever have been able to before. And if that's what the event is designed to do, then it's now very, very simple to do and very engaging for people. And it's the way people get their knowledge these days, the way that people do engage with what's going on in the world, whether it be Donald Trump on Twitter, or it be a live feed from the National Theatre in your local cinema, and you're experiencing what only 500 people have experienced in the National the week before, and now 2 million people are seeing it. It's all getting ability of people to engage beyond the physicality of the room that it's in. That's what I believe it is.
2 Americans on the panel talking about Donald Trump might be a bit dangerous.
Just trying to wind you up.
Adele, how do you see visitor empowerment, and how is that affecting the events that you work on?
Well, I totally agree with Richard on this one, but to kind of come back to the kind of physical space of the room and what happens in there before, during, after, I feel like across very different types of events, you've kind of found that there's been a shift in that it's kind of now the visitor that tells you what they expect at the event, as opposed to potentially in the past having the event planning companies, the caterers, the suppliers suggesting what would work best for them. I know that personally in our business, what we do bespoke creative briefs, and we're a very young company, that's literally what we concentrate on, because we get a lot of companies that are telling us, this is our vision, can you make it happen? I also feel like customers and visitors are empowered because they will almost pre-select an event before they even go there, which is why having high quality online content is so important. You now go into an event page that already has a video of a previous event. Sometimes this event actually hasn't happened before, but the content has been produced to give you an idea of like what you're gonna get there. And the customer will kind of approve this and then decide whether they want to attend the event. And then within the kind of physical realm of the venue, instead of having fixed schedules, for example, you now have the opportunity to kind of pick and mix and decide what parts of the event you want to take part on and what is not interesting for you. On the kind of industry side, we are lucky that we now have the tools that we can collect data and we can really figure out what it was that the guests really also enjoyed and what we can change for future events. But I feel like that's also part of visitor empowerment. It's all about them now.
And I think what we're really talking about is curation. And Caleb, in our discussion earlier, you talked about how customization of the visitor curation is really important. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure, yeah, so I think just mainly piggybacking on what Adele was saying, giving your audience the ability to contribute to what your event agenda is going to be, curating that content from them, enables them to then pick and choose what they're going to come to. As an example, at the HBAA, we had an annual forum, and every year we do a survey of what's most important to our membership, and based on what's most important to them, that's the topics that we sort of have to pick and choose from. Then we list our agenda for the membership for them to sort of pick and choose which topic they're going to come to. We have a campfire session coming up at our annual forum where we have about 50 different topics being talked about in the room. And if you're a very anal person, you'll hate this, but you can literally go to one session, participate for 5 minutes, and go to another session, participate. It's just this massive multiple conversations. But I think giving your audience the ability to contribute to that and pick and choose, they create their own customized experience. They have a more meaningful experience from that.
How did this kind of experience economy evolve? What changed in the way that we produce events and in the visitor to make curation and customization so important?
Well, I don't know if there's any one answer to that, but I think if you look at the way the world's going, we have this whole on-demand economy now, where we can get a taxi with our phone, we can get Netflix on demand, we can get somebody to hang our paintings in our house through TaskRabbit. So we have this whole, I want things on demand, and that's an instant gratification experience. And I think, and you can pick and choose and see reviews and Airbnb. Anyway, so if you go back to events, then that just kind of, in my opinion, it carries over from that. People want to just pick and choose their experience.
Julian?
I just think it's really interesting how the language that we're using has evolved. We never used to talk about audience. You know, we talk about people or footfall or guests, and now we talk about audience. And I said to Richard and I joked before, we said, when you talk about engagement, it's something about an event in a jeweler. It was nothing to do with marketing. So I think what has changed is that events, I've talked about this before, historically were very two-dimensional. It was a sort of stand and deliver affair that you'd create something, people would turn up, hopefully it would make an impact, and then they went away. And I kind of think the world of marketing has now changed, and we've moved from what I would call push marketing, which is, this is who we are, this is the statement we're going to make, like it or not, to engagement marketing, as in the buyer has all the choice. The buyer wants to be told how they're going to interact. It's controlled by the brands, the clients, the event organizers. They want to create something that's going to engage people. People don't want to be shouted at. They want to be drawn in. So we've kind of gone from sort of push marketing to engagement marketing, which is really, engagement marketing is another word for experiential marketing. So in that, creating experiences is really where the event arena has taken itself. And I mean, tech again has the power to amplify that. I'm not necessarily sure it has the power to deliver the experience, but it certainly has the power to embellish it and prolong it.
I think what it's probably come from is the fact that if you're going to try and control the message, you've got to get on and you've got to control it, because you've got to be there ahead of the people that are possibly going to engage with the outer world before you do. I remember when we first started, when Twitter and phones all started being completely omnipresent, we used to take the staff phones away because we didn't want them taking a picture and sending it to their mate, or they didn't want them tweeting about it or whatever. So that's just the staff engagement of it, and what the visitors would also be probably doing exactly the same. So to stop them doing that, or to make the best result out of that, then if you can lead that process and therefore give content and a forum and a platform for people to be able to do that, then that's you in control of the engagement, and which is where I think this empowerment has all come from.
Emma, did you have?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms, is this working? Yeah. I was just saying, in terms of a lot of the events we do, again, because our sort of venues are very sort of lifestyle led, we find that the event organizer wants their guests to feel like they can relate to something, and that it's lifestyle. It's somewhere they would go if they weren't at that event. You know, it's memorable. It's an experience for them. So even like our food and drink offering, everything's customized. So whereas traditionally, and obviously, you know, it still happens, you know, an event organizer would book in a set menu that would be for canapes. It would be booked in at a set time. So we're going to have, you know, around at 7:30, around at 8:30. Now, with our food, they want a free-for-all. They want people to explore. You know, it's very much an exploration where people can go and try food from all over the world. There's no menu necessarily that's formed. It's a really sort of open book, but also people can go and explore at their own pace. So rather than having food served to them, we create these branded sort of food menus, food vouchers that have their branding on, that have a lot of the events we do, they create their own hashtag now for every single event they do. So people are, you know, posting on social media, hashtag this event. And this isn't actually just for the public events, this is for a lot of the private corporate events we do as well. And then the same with the drinks, you know, they don't just want sort of beer, wines, softs, they want, you know, we create cocktails with the colours branded in the company name, and, you know, we sort of get really creative with them, and we do find that people want that sort of lifestyle. So it's just really interesting to see that, and we're sort of quite open to that.
Could I just build on that?
Yeah, of course.
I feel like it's worth talking also about the influence of kind of public events on the kind of private event sector. And, you know, like, so at Street Feast, for example, you're pretty much like the giants of street food in London, which is awesome. And I think a lot of people will feel like if on a weekend they go and they have all those really interesting street food traders on offer, or they go to their favorite cocktail bar, you know, somewhere down the line, I think people decided that they expected a really high standard at corporate events as well, or at their private birthday parties. And I think that this is definitely going to influence what people are asking from the kind of, you know, pre-booked events that they're going to have in like closed venues as well. And I think that's really influenced the way that we do our food, bearing in mind that our company is 2 years old. So we just started thinking, what do people want? What do they like to do in their free time? And how can we make sure that they kind of get that indoors? And we're very inspired by the local street food scene, the markets, what people do. It really influences our menus, the way we present our things. And yeah, I think that was my point.
It's interesting because the high street was always the poor relation of special events. And now the high street is really leading the way in the sense that, you know, the audience, the public, they have so much choice, they want to be so involved. And so when you attend a special event, in a way it has to have the same opportunity for you to have that level of choice, the possibility to interact, that you're not just a sort of a passive receiver of the organizer's idea of the event. You know, that somehow you should be able to. It is that kind of window shopping experience that you go to an event and there's a possibility to interact.
We very much have this sort of saying that our corporates are our consumer and vice versa, because our venues are open on the weekends to the public. And no matter who's in that venue, they all, you know, work somewhere. And vice versa, if they're there for a corporate event, you know, would they come back here, you know, for their own personal use? And we try not to separate it, because, you know, everyone essentially is our customers.
I think that kind of leads us on to our next question, which is about online communities and how social media and online communities are affecting the events world. So, Caleb, I wondered if you could talk to us a bit about how social media and online communities are making it easier to curate events.
Well, going back to what I said earlier, when you do want to curate that content, you can use social media to do that. And you can sort of rally everyone around a hashtag pre-event, during the event, and after the event. And I think it's super amazing that you can, with a hashtag, go on to Twitter, for instance, or Instagram, and see all of the amazing photos and tweets and things that people said about the people in the room. Hopefully there'll be some tonight. What is the hashtag tonight, by the way?
Not sure. Is there one?
Is it EventLAB? Hashtag EventLAB.
Good to know.
but at Caleb_Parker. No, I think leading up to an event, you can use social media to curate the content that you want, but then you have to think about, do you want to do that in a public forum? And you know, at HBAA, for instance, there are certain things that we would want to do in a public forum, but there are certain things we wouldn't want to do. So we're looking at technology to have a private online community for our membership. If we were a private company, maybe we would do that just for our company. But I think the other piece to that is, for instance, social media gives us the ability to extend the event beyond the on-site. I think you mentioned that earlier. So after an event takes place, you can go back and look at all the Twitter tweets and all the posts on Instagram, but it gives the members of the people who are in the audience or the guests, whoever come to the event, it gives them the chance to connect with each other online afterwards as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that we all discussed earlier, which is about extending the life of the event. So I don't know, Adele, maybe how do you see that playing into social media and online communities? Why is it so important to be involved online pre, during, and after the event?
Well, I'll tell you what I think, but it's not necessarily related to what I do. Because I think with public events, you definitely have an online community that is basically influencing their peers into going to an event. So something as simple as like a Facebook event, recommending something to you on your feed because your friends are going there. That's starting to have a really big influence on like the kind of attendee rate that you're going to get. When it comes to, you know, events that, you know, are organized by private or corporate clients, it's more about kind of, like we always say that, you know, if we have to create experiences that are worth sharing. That's kind of how we like do everything that we do. We always think about it. Is someone gonna want to like take a picture and like tell their friends about it? And this relates to every kind of part of the event. So that's entertainment, but it's also things like food. It's no longer enough just to taste the food at the event. You need to share it with other people. So that's very much something that's completely, it's making your event have a much, much bigger audience than it used to, because it used to be reserved for the people that were on the guest list at this event. But now you have the entire social media community behind it. A slightly different point that I'm gonna make kind of relates to a demographic called the millennials, which is very much part of our kind of target customers, maybe because I am one. But I also feel like there's a huge power in having kind of advocates and influencers that are gonna communities of people going to an event, talking about an event, and interacting with them after as well. And there's a reason why you now have like literally marketing agencies that provide influencers, full campaigns and events behind them, you know?
Caleb?
You want to add something?
Yeah, I think just continuing on with that, if you can think about, you have an event, you invite these influencers to it, and you have an amazing experience there. You connect with your influencers, you build a relationship with them, but then you're creating a ton of content that you can use post-event from that event. And that can go into a marketing campaign, it can go into so many different things, whether it's recruitment, whether it's product launch, etc. So I just wanted to say that it creates content as well.
But it's also the opportunity to monetize, because if you've got a conference for 400 people in one venue and they might be paying £200 to come, you've got a sponsor who wants to engage with that. But what you've also then got is other communities and other satellites outside that 400 people who are taking that feed or taking that information or being fed that information, who might be in other consumer groups who are maybe paying £10 to get that content. Well, if you've got 4 million people all paying £10, and that sponsorship deal for the 400 people in that one room is an amazing piece of business for that sponsoring company. And that is where the new technology has given sponsors and content providers the opportunity to really leapfrog beyond one small space. This could be streamed to all around the world. We're here, and Higher Space would have their sign at the back. Huge exposure as opposed to the 40 people in the room. That's where I think the difference has come.
And Julian, from kind of, Richard and Julian, from the hospitality catering perspective, how does the need to create shareable experiences at an event impact the menus that you serve and how you provide to an event?
Well, I mean, what I was going to say was the power of the online community as a marketing tool, not just in terms of market research, speaking to your 500,000 festival followers who's going to appear at such and such an event. And I mean, it's a promoter's dream to be able to speak to the audience in advance of an event to make sure that the programming is as hot as it can be. But I was also thinking of some events we used to do for HTC, the mobile phone brand. And whenever HTC brought out a new product, they would throw a sort of behind-the-scenes party for the first 700 people who retweeted an image of their new gizmo. And it was an incredibly powerful device because those 700 people tweeted images of the new product, which in turn got a huge number of reshares, and therein was their sort of their free marketing campaign. And then we would put on a sort of street style party that used to take place in a warehouse or wherever, and they were sort of hotly contested for the first 700 people that turned up were invited to this party, and that community online was an incredibly effective marketing device. But that doesn't answer your question.
It's okay.
In terms of the food, I mean, I think, look, there's the online community it's saturated with food and menus, and food porn is unfortunately kind of in some respects I would say is kind of killed the beauty and the pleasure of food, and it's become such a narcissistic genre. People are just beautifying their food in the name of getting likes, as opposed to having real experiences with food, which is why I think street food is such a sort of hot, ever-growing genre, because it's not about food. I'm not surprised you say hate it, because it's not. It's the antithesis of food porn. It's about sharing. It's about food that's prepared in front of your eyes. It's about a real experience. And actually, I think it's rather refreshing to see pictures that don't look that great in the food porn stakes, but they actually tell a story. And that also, in terms of online communities sharing food and sharing experience, is very important.
And it's interesting about this photograph thing, because when people do take pictures of food, and I've got some friends who consistently take pictures of their dinner when they go out, and you look at it and think, why are they eating that? That looks disgusting, because it's brown and the lighting's crap, and it just looks dreadful. But you know that some of your shots, if people come to events, some of those shots are going to be on Instagram. You'll suddenly see your buffet or street stall on a Pinterest board at some point. You think, oh, I did that. And what it's done is, I think it's encouraged theatricality. It's made if you're doing a loosely engaged type party, like the sort of thing we're talking about the street food and stalls and interactive food, then you know people are going to take photographs of it, and it makes you think a little bit more about how it's going to be presented. It's not just those people standing with sort of slightly dull lighting in the room. You do light it differently. You make it taller. You make it brighter, and you know that it's actually going to be represented somewhere else, and it's your opportunity to make it look great, make people want to take a picture, and then those people who weren't in that room, the external market that we keep talking about, the tail end of the event, get an image of what those other people enjoyed, and therefore it helps everybody's brands going forward and makes people feel a little bit more like they were there.
One thing that I wanted to touch on with online communities is the idea of confidentiality with your clients. A lot of you work with corporate clients who don't necessarily want to publicize, but still want to share things, or you maybe want to share that you've worked with this big name client. How do you kind of balance that tricky scenario?
I do think it's amazing when you sign a non-disclosure agreement with Aston Martin about a car launch, and then 500,000 attendees photograph it and retweet it. So the organisers are keeping their mouth shut, but then of course the whole online community broadcasts the things from the rooftops. So, it's I think it's a very sort of rich area for sort of counter arguments of protecting the interests of a brand, but also people sort of sabotaging that process.
Yeah, I think it's all part of the build-up, because yes, you can sign the NDA, and it's about your planners and the venue and the providers not telling the world that they're going to be working on this. We did an event for a company that makes phones, and they wanted to prove that they can make a phone that doesn't burst into flames. So they were doing a very big engagement program. We weren't allowed to talk about it beforehand. We took all our staff's phones away. But of course, as Julian said, then it went viral within moments, because this is a new phone and everybody wanted to talk about it. But it was just to lead up to it. So it's being much more cagey and much more secure about the pre-message rather than the end message.
Well, that's very interesting. In effect, then the power of the event then is the big reveal. And that's sort of my counter argument to tech is that it's kind of like the cat is out the bag. Yes, the power of the pre-event conversation, but isn't there something wonderful about the curtain going back, and you're exposed to that experience? You've got a sense of it for the very first time on the night, as opposed to this kind of slow build-up. And let's not forget that some of these pre-event conversations have the power to fail as well. They can run out of steam. You can engage people in a conversation, and then it sort of loses momentum. So I think there are pitfalls to where the online community, the conversation doesn't do what it's meant to do.
Yeah, that was also another thing that I wanted to touch on, is where you see some events falling down and the pitfalls of social media. Caleb, I wondered if you could maybe talk about, do you see kind of events or organizers making common mistakes that you just wish you could shake them and say, stop doing this?
Well, I don't have personal experience, but I've observed. I think if I'm gonna bring Trump back up for a moment. So actually, back to your first question, I think an event is when two or more people come together to collaborate or do business. But so when Trump had his all of his people around him making an announcement about women's reproductive rights, and it happened to be all white men in the room, I thought that was a big social media fail. Okay, so if you take that lesson and come back to there's something else. This is a rumor. I'm going to say it. This is a rumor because I've heard it. I didn't observe it, but what I heard was there was an organization that did not want people doing any social media at the event. They wanted to lock it down, and somebody happened to get a signal and tweeted out a picture of the panel, which was all white men, and it was talking about diversity. So I think social media, even though you try to lock it down, it might still slip in, and even you can still get a picture taken and tweet it later. So I think going back to the food it helps you sort of think about that before you, because you know people are going to be taking pictures. Well, maybe when you organize a meeting and you have an agenda in place, you think about that as well.
And let's not forget the power of the online community to express their discontent.
Yes.
You know, when Innocent were acquired by McDonald's, Coca-Cola, sorry, I was Pret, yeah, another one, or Body Shop and Revlon, or you know, the power of the dissenting voice in that online community can have a very detrimental effect.
Emma.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, one thing I've noticed a lot of the big public events we do, it's everyone's so busy, posting things on social media about what they're eating and doing. Are they actually enjoying the moment as well? You could flip it that way and say, okay, you're telling the whole world, but actually the people that you're with, are you engaging with the people you're with?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, I think you said that about, when you're resharing something, are you actually, we're all being drawn into the experience, but are we actually, are we having the experience?
But I think millennials can multitask.
No, I actually
Maybe, can we?
I totally agree with Caleb on this one. I think it is somehow like a generational thing. I think millennials and now, Gen Z, Gen Y, they're like so used to just multitasking, interacting, sharing, and they're still in the moment. I think it's not always a problem for everyone. It's kind of a mindset. For some other event organizer, it will look like people need to talk about the event because it's good PR, but they should also be engaged in the room because you also don't want to lose them, particularly if you have a presentation of sorts or different activities that they should be taken part of.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an important discussion to have too. Is there a point of oversharing and not actually engaging in what an event is, which is face-to-face? And I think, Adele, you have talked a little bit about that. How do you make sure that your visitors aren't oversharing and that you actually make them present in the event that's happening in front of them?
I don't think it's a problem when people are oversharing.
And I don't think you can make anybody do anything.
True.
Give them the option, let them choose.
Ban their phones for an entire event.
Lock down the Wi-Fi.
Another thing that could be interesting, if you think about pop-ups and extremely popular restaurant concepts that have like popped up that are usually temporary, some of these will kind of work in reverse in that they really have a big build-up. It's a lot of secrecy around the event, but they have an online community that's already subscribed to the concept and are just waiting for the next thing. When the guests show up at the event, they have to leave their phones at the door so that they can fully go through that immersive experience that the organizer has decided is their thing. But they've already adhered to this idea. Whereas if you do an after-work networking event with lots of activities and you tell people, give me your phone at the door, just good luck with that.
Right. I think that might be a good way to transition into our discussion about technology and where we think the future of technology in the events world lies. And what are the experiences going to be in the future? So, Emma, you talked a little bit about easier access to information and costs. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think just for event organisers to be able to access information, as quickly as they can. We find a lot, with inquiries that we get on a daily basis, people just don't want to talk to humans anymore. They want the information, they want it quickly, they wanted it yesterday. How can they gather that information? It just seems to be all about speed and sort of the easy access with that, mainly.
Because I think the kind of buzzwords that came up when we were talking earlier about technology was VR and AR, and we will get to that in a second. But I do want to talk about the other aspects of technology, as Emma's hinted at. Information being easier to access, does technology make the life of an event organizer or an event manager or an event supplier, does technology fundamentally make the event easier now? Richard, can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, it's the journey that the event goes on. So it's the pre-planning, it's the expectation, it's the delivery, and then it's the tail end of the event that then has a life that goes much beyond anything that Julian and I ever started doing many years ago when we first started catering for parties. And there's a piece of research that I saw this morning in the office, trends in technology for events, and they asked a whole range of event planners and people in the MICE industry and stuff, what aspects of technology that people would be using for their events and whether they definitely would, maybe, and definitely wouldn't. And for instance, social media had 87% adherence to the fact that they were going to use it. VR, we were going to talk about virtual reality, but only 7% of people said that VR was actually going to be part of their event planning in 2017. So people are still very picky. They're still slightly suspect about the stuff. It will come. You know, these beacons, when you go around events, exhibitions these days, and you trigger a beacon as you walk past the stand, you get the information from that stand straight to your phone. It goes through people, it goes through set, the whole, and then you can trigger them because you can say before you go what you're interested in. So you get all that feed in. But it still needs the exhibition. You're still going to walk up and down Old Billingsgate or the Earl's Court or somewhere. And because those people need to be in that room to do it, even though you can actually have a virtual exhibition and you can just scroll over all the stands on a screen and pick out the information you want from them. That is feasible. But actually people do want to stand and talk and do want to go around exhibitions. But you can trigger information a lot more easily.
Julian, as someone who's also been in the industry for a while, how have you seen technology change how events are run and planned and managed?
There wasn't any technology when I started. Literally nothing. I mean, it was. It's. I mean, I come from an arts background, and it really was. It was acoustic. It was. And I think what's really interesting now is how we've really come full cycle, because the marketeers now talk about, you have to engage people emotionally. You have to tell them stories. You can't. It's not just about impact. It's not just about shouting at people. You have to. The brand has to understand its own DNA, and then it has to tell a story about it that emotionally involves people, which of course is. It's kind of that sort of goes back. That idea really predates technology. So I kind of think. In the name of storytelling and emotional engagement, technology can help with that, but it can also destroy it.
And I guess that leads perfectly into the discussion about virtual reality and augmented reality. And I wanted to talk to Caleb about how you see virtual reality and augmented reality kind of entering the events world.
Well, I think virtual reality is actually going to have a short life. But it will play a significant part for the near future. If you think about just curious, how many people are organizers in the room, event organizers? And how many are venues, suppliers? Okay. So think about your process of interacting with each other and site visits. And if you could do a site visit from home, how amazing, or from your office. I say from home because I work from home most of the time. But yeah, that's another question. How many people work from home? Okay. But imagine if you could do a site visit literally at home or from your office. No, you don't like it? No? Are you a supplier or an organizer?
I'm an agency, actually. I think that as much as the VR...
Should we do a microphone for you?
I can try to speak up. As much as the VR, the technology will actually enhance will enhance what we're doing as organizers. At the same time, the personal experience will always supersede that. Similarly, with all the information, Emma, you were just saying that there's so much information out there that people actually will do more themselves. I actually disagree. I think that relationships and those personal connections will still come through. We're being absolutely flooded with information. So therefore, what we have ourselves, what we trust and what we value, actually becomes more important to people.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think both come together with so for instance in a VR capacity, or all the information, all the data being present. So it enables you as an agency to get all of the information you need to then ask intelligent questions when you do meet with that person.
True, but in a VR you can never go to the bathrooms. And you should always check out the bathrooms in a site.
And I agree with you. You know, we always try and encourage, particularly for the larger, the bigger corporate things, to meet them, and you always will. But there just seems to be huge demand. What I'm finding, that people they just want really easy access, and they don't want to put too much time into it. But I totally agree with you that on a personal level, I always like to personally meet people still, talk them through how it's going to work, build that trust, build that relationship, and the toilet's also always really important.
But because events are such a tangible, subjective, emotional experience, whether it be what the flowers are like, or what the music's like, or what the temperature of the venue, or the hand soap in the loo, we could save hundreds of thousands of pounds for not doing tastings. But people want to try the food. They want to see what it looks like. You can show them a picture of a main course or a starter or a bowl food or whatever. And unfortunately, you can buy a holiday halfway around the world from a screen, and that's where you're going to spend your honeymoon. But actually, people want to come and see what are they going to get on the plate and what it's going to look like, and how's the tablecloth going to fall on the ground. Just those tangible, subjective things.
I think that I have to admit, I had to look up what VR standard for over the weekend. But now that I know what it does stand for, there was a fantastic brand experience run by Boursin, the supermarket. Cheese, garlic is its unique selling point. And in this experience, they had some kind of installation, don't know where it took place, and it was a refrigerated room, and you went in, so suddenly the whole temperature was lower because you were in a sort of dairy refrigerated environment, and you put on some goggles, and they took you into this kind of CGI garlic fields experience, which for me is a really imaginative way to use tech to sell a pretty pedestrian sort of high street supermarket brand. Conversely, if I went to a street food market, I would want to talk to the trader about the Boursin, about the fact that his grandmother grew fields of garlic in France, and etc. So I think it's really horses for courses, and I think we have to be very careful when we exploit the power of tech, but when we kind of kill what are meant to be spontaneous experiences.
Caleb, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, I was just going to touch on the VR one more time and move into AR a little bit. Is that all right? Just on the VR, virtual reality. So let's say you go to the site visit, and you're able to look at what a room configuration could look like in many different configurations. Just by putting on and turning a button, and you could see what the room would look like in different. It's a lot easier to picture what that ballroom is going to look like when it's set up in rounds versus theater style versus etc. Versus looking at just a floor plan. And so I think VR plays a part there. AR, augmented reality. That's I think we're just scratching the surface of that, but it's amazing. And just imagine being in a room, and I'm not talking necessarily holograms, but imagine being able to see someone or something in a room that's not really there, but it looks like it's there, and it literally looks like it's there. And does that sound cool? I mean, yeah. I think augmented reality, I'm still trying to learn and understand it myself, but so far I think it's impressive. I think it's the next best thing.
Adele,
next big thing.
what's your kind of take on VR and AR?
I almost feel like I'm sitting in between two different camps here. So, I mean, I think it's important to kind of concentrate on the positive effects that technology can bring and all of the tools that are available and being developed at the moment, because I agree that technology can get in the way of emotional engagement and different experiences that are very physical, like that uses your senses, like taste things. But it's also the choice of both the organizers and the audiences to make the best out of those technologies and decide what they want to do with it. So from an event organizer perspective, as well as from an audience, I think some of the most useful things that have kind of come about are the fact that yes, virtual reality can be used in different ways, but one very simple way to do it is just to have a couple of VR sets at the entrance of your massive exhibition, which is a physical, traditional walk-around exhibition, and you can just literally look at the plan of the entire room, figure out where everything is, have some information available, kind of navigate through that. That is a way to incorporate VR into your event without necessarily having to change the entire setup. I also feel like people are warming up to VR, but it does come at a cost, and it's becoming more and more accessible, but it's going to take a little time. Another tool that I think is really interesting that we haven't mentioned is RFID. This is basically when, for example, if you have an RFID wristband, you go to a festival, right? So you've pre-registered, it's linked to your Facebook account. You go to a festival, it can be used for lots of things like checking in. So instead of like pulling out your ticket and stuff, you just have to scan it. But also if you meet someone at this festival, and this is when it also encourages interaction, staying in touch, you can kind of like tap bracelets against each other, and then your email address will get saved into a cloud, and it gets sent to each other, and also the organizer will always have your contact details. And it's also a way to gather feedback. And this is like such a huge advance from the time of event planning when you're collecting email addresses in a spreadsheet, if you had a spreadsheet at the time, and then trying to send follow-up emails, and then trying to gather all this data, get people back in a room for like a survey. Like there are so many opportunities with that. I also think augmented reality is really cool because you can walk into a room, and it's like a room of this size, but then it's not. It's like 7 times the size of this room, and you can like create so many different interactions that wouldn't be possible within the physical realm of the space. So that changes the game entirely when it comes to venues.
Richard, did you have something to add?
Yes,
there?
I was just thinking, even though by my survey that I've been looking at, that only 7% of people said they'd ever think of a hologram as part of their holographic experience as part of their conference in 2017. I think there will be a spike of it because in the Paris elections or the French elections last week, one of the candidates appeared in 6 different hustings at the same time. Now, the idea of a hologram of a politician is the sort of thing that nightmares are made of, but to actually be able to get the same person into different spaces across the globe is an amazing option.
Well, it saves cost. If you think about multi-hub meetings, it'll save massive cost. You have one speaker, but he's projected everywhere. So instead of flying people all to one spot, they can stay where they are, saves massive travel cost.
Very quickly, I just wanted to touch on something that Adele, you mentioned, which is big data and RFID saving that kind of data. Do you think that while there are a lot of benefits for the organizer or for the manager, do you see visitors a bit reticent about signing up for that and having their information stored for forever, basically?
I think some individuals might be opposed to it, but generally speaking, I think it's about convenience and an easier experience. It's kind of similar to when you want to sign up to an app, but as soon as you have to actually write your email, you're like, I only wanted to link it through my Facebook. So as long as you trust, the kind of platform, like in this case, Facebook, and that you've already accepted this in your life, you'll be happy with this at the event. I think you have to kind of bear in mind what kind of event this is and the demographic. I just talked about a festival, a music festival, usually younger crowd, people getting drunk for the entire weekend, so might be open-minded to sharing contact details, along the way. I don't know I feel like for conferences, on the other hand, like you have ways for the organizer to kind of explain in advance, thanks to online communities, that this is how the information is going to be used and why it's important, etc. So guests could also be reassured this way. I don't really see it as a big obstacle, personally.
Caleb?
So, as you know, I host a TV show called The Future in 15, and we just interviewed James Reese from Excel. And one of the things he was talking about with big data is they're looking into, or they're utilizing a technology that gives them the ability to capture very limited information from delegates that are at Excel. And it's volunteer information that they're providing to get on the Wi-Fi. But with that information, because of the data that exists out in the public realm, they can learn about that visitor and sort of say who Mr. and Mrs. Excel is, and then work with the organizers for the next year and the year after that to customize the experience so Mr. and Mrs. Excel has an amazing experience next time that's more bespoke and customized to their preferences. That's big data.
And I think that is a really nice kind of full circle that we've created there, coming back to visitor engagement and visitor empowerment. So at this time, I want to kind of throw it to the floor, and if anyone has any questions, we've got a microphone kind of roaming, so wait for the microphone and then ask your question. So just raise your hands if you have a question.
Hi. You spoke about a lot about live streaming. What's the best live streaming experience that you've seen? That's who, Richard.
I think probably the one that and it's very early on actually. It was quite a few years ago when it was just really beginning to be acceptable, and that there was the opportunity to do it, and also there was the market to do it, and it was a business school. We had to sign an NDA, so I can't tell you who it was, but it's big American business school, and they held an event in London, which we catered for in Old Billingsgate Market, and Bill Clinton spoke, and they, as Caleb said, to get him there with a security detachment and overnight stays and things, it was quite an expensive option. So that was the first example I'd had of this is then being beamed back to Massachusetts and to Florida and to Harvard and all the other places that people wanted to see it, and you could really see the value in that, because you had to be somewhere, and it just happened to be in London doing it because they were trying to. It was an alumni event for this business school as well, so they were trying to pull all the fundraising together, and that was I thought that very cool.
Just behind you, actually.
Can I just say one thing about just in response to that question about live streaming? There's whether you'd call them events, I think the live broadcasts of opera from the Metropolitan Opera to cinemas in the UK is an amazing example of streaming, what has seen to be been criticised for being elitist and inaccessible and unaffordable, and sort of breaking those boundaries. So you can go and watch sort of fine art in your local cinema. I think that's a very good example of where live streaming has been a very effective tool to share an experience, but also to sort of break down boundaries.
Hi, so I've just recently moved into working in experiential. I've got a digital and social background. So one of the things I've noticed since I've moved in is a lot of clients, they're more interested, shall I say, in the people who may come to an experience but aren't as highly engaged. So we could be doing things where, it could be a sign up, buy a product and things like that. So a lot of that has meant that we're having to incorporate various bits of technology. So how do you guys, how do you solve that conundrum of tracking those people back into the funnel online at a later date to kind of continue the consumer journey? Is that something that you come across a lot, or is that just like a newer thing?
I'm not quite sure I understand that. The fear is that they're not. The fear is that they won't be engaged in the experience.
Yeah.
And how can you use technology to?
Yeah, to keep them within that.
Oof. I mean, I think that's very much down to the specific brand and the the story the brand tells, and how you can use technology to make that story stronger or clearer or more interesting.
I think it takes us back to the beginnings of events. It's hospitality. It's making people feel warm, comfortable in an environment they want to stay in, and so they're there and they know it's for them, and those people within that environment feel cosseted and welcomed, and it's back to hospitality with a big H.
Are you asking like what specific tools or what strategy?
Because there's a few clients I've been working with. So it's you get them in, and the aim of it is they may sign up to something or something like that. So it's more of an event kind of aimed at sign-ups. But then it's those people that come to it and then just leave, kind of disengaged. Maybe they don't want to sign up and part with their information. So we've been experimenting with beacons is one thing, because it taps into the devices. How do you? I know
it sounds like a really big question. It sounds like you're asking for an entire strategy.
Any other questions?
Hi. As you may know, we from Skills Matter, we've been organising tech events for over 14 years, so conferences, training, etc. And one type of event in the tech industry is an unconference. So people come along, they're interested in perhaps a particular type of technology, and they come along to the event, and it's actually at the event itself where the content is curated. So people come along and they have an idea about what they'd like to cover during the day, and then the attendees vote on their particular topic, and then through the day the content is kind of curated on the fly, so live. So it's really, really relevant and creates huge amount of attendee engagement. And I was just wondering if this kind of sort of unconference approach is popular in other types of industries, as well as just the tech industry, which often kind of leads the way in new ways of delivering events.
Wow. Should have been on the panel.
Maybe next time.
That's sort of what we're trying to replicate with the campfire sessions, where we have 25 or 30 different topics that people can choose where to go. And there's a moderator, but really it's people just standing around having a discussion. And it's not somebody speaking at them, it's just everybody engaging each other on that topic. And as you can imagine, we've got a few perspectives up here, but when you get all these people in talking about their perspectives, it's really cool, but you can learn a lot from it.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hi. Yeah, I was curious about whether you thought things like social media and maybe TripAdvisor, websites like that, have sort of raised the bar for events, because people can see their competitors, visitors can see if you have a bad event, and it's kind of made everyone just up their game.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you can, the more transparency you can have, the more game raising there's going to be.
There's a lot of talk about advertising for events, you know, if they're public events, or if you're doing marketing, experiential campaigns. In terms of these sort of events that businesses put on to gain, you know, to get crowds and get people moving, has there, like, you know, how much consideration is there a thought process in that process of when do we stop? When do we stop advertising? When do we stop using channels? Because actually we can cause something, you know, we can cause overcrowding at events. And we, you know, already only last night or the other night at the O2 Brixton, there was a Jamaican artist, and because of like how they advertised, because of the size of the artist, there was far too overcrowding and actually turned into chaos, and the police had to shut down the street and things like that. But this kind of there can be a lot of like brand activations that create this crowd kind of mania. And, you know, it's that kind of, is there that sort of thought process, okay, we need to like get it out there, but actually, are we doing too much?
So I guess if an event is maybe too successful in its kind of advertising, anyone have any?
Do you find, do street markets can they get overcrowded?
Yeah, so with some of the events, I guess because we've done a lot now, we know what the sort of dropout rate can be, so we kind of base it on history of other events. I think we very much, everything we do is like online and, you know, through all the social media channels. So we will really look into what our customers are saying, what our traffic levels are, and we're not, if anything, we're much more focused around the quality than necessarily the quantity of an event. So we've had some big public events we've done where, you know, it has sort of reached the capacity of what we're willing to sell, and we do have extra capacity, but, you know, we'd much rather focus on the quality, and the people that do come there have an amazing experience. So the next event we do, you know, you've got that word of mouth and that reputation of not somewhere that's just absolutely packed, but can't actually deliver on the event. So I think, yeah, you have to get really careful on that as well to make sure that quality is still there.
Did any of you hear about a brand activation that Innocent did called Unplugged? It was, yeah, I mean, they won numerous awards for it, and it was basically a sort of festival style thing where people went into a wood, and they were very strict about when the social media coverage stopped. So I think they literally pulled the plug a couple of days before, and then you literally couldn't be involved in this experience if you had any gadgets with you at all. And then after the event, there was a sort of silence. It was about the power of silence, and as soon as the kind of the veto on technology was lifted, then it kind of exploded, and it was a very powerful campaign. So it's just a very clever use of, going back to our roots, but also how to use technology to sort of amplify simplicity.
But what you need to do is make sure that the operational issue of it and how it is engaged with follows through as well. There was one example last year, an October Beer Fest product that was out in East London, and it was so successful that everybody bought tickets, and they were expecting about 5,000 people on that day. But the catering support element and the venue management didn't keep up with the numbers, and so they had to close it after about 20 minutes, which didn't go down awfully well with the 4,880 people still outside. So it was incredibly bad news for the venue, incredibly bad news for the organizer, and it set that sort of public engagement, that venue particularly, back a long way.
Yeah, which actually I mentioned before, the HTC campaign, where they said the first 700 people to attend this event, the first 700 people to retweet this new product of ours get to attend this event, which is a brilliant way of controlling footfall, but at the same time, those people can, that message can be shared again and again.
I think there's a question back there.
Hello. So I was just kind of listening to all the different themes and the trends that have come from today, and you were talking about kind of going back to our roots, and also the problem with kind of capacity as well, and also extending the life of the event. So I don't want to make this all about VR because it's come up quite a bit, but do you ever think that there'll be a time when people don't actually pay for festival tickets, or not just talking about clients going for site visits, but people don't pay for festival tickets or pay for event tickets, but they actually go and visit the event via VR headsets? Do you ever think that it was a kind of a debate that we were having at an exhibition I went to on Saturday and also at the office today? So it's quite an interesting thing. Do you think people will turn around and say, oh, I don't want to be in a smelly campsite this weekend, I'd rather go and visit and experience it via this headset?
I think that's a really interesting point, because there are companies that are popping up and creating kind of virtual reality for festivals. So it'd be interesting to hear if we think that will ever fully replace going to the event, or is it just kind of a supplement to it?
Well, I hope not, because festivals particularly and concerts are all about engaging with the artist, all about the fact that you're there with 40,000 other people watching this band of 5 people making a hell of a lot of noise and everybody knowing the words. That is irreplaceable, and if that ever stops, then I for one will be incredibly sad about it, and I don't think it will. My 10-year-old daughter is very engaged on her phone and on the TV about watching stuff, and she probably doesn't realize you can go to it as well, but she gets just as much energy back from it by watching it. And we were talking beforehand about going to a concert, and you're standing halfway back from Wembley or the O2 or something, and you end up just watching Take That on a screen, and you think, why am I standing here with all these other people just watching Take That on a screen? Because you can see Mark Owen over there, but you can actually see much bigger there. And so you're sort of slightly disengaged anyway, and you've got 50,000 people in front of you with their phones up in the air. So it's getting quite an odd experience from when Julian and I used to go to concerts and things in our youth, and that was before Bob Dylan went electric. So if it ever happens, I think we're heading to the end of civilization as we know it.
I also think the food element and the drink is so important. So you could have that on and feel like you're somewhere, but actually people want to see, touch, feel, taste. At all the events we do, the number one thing that's talked about all the time is the food. People want to taste the food. They want to try a different drink. They want to explore and, taste things they've never done before. So I don't think we'll ever lose that. I hope not.
So I'm going to be contrarian. I think when people started talking 25 years ago about shopping online, people said, "No, I want to touch the clothes and I want to try them on first." And now, we all know the story there. you don't, but I love American football. I love American football, and I'm sure there's many people who love real football. But how many times? I mean, how many people have season tickets versus how many people who watch it on television? And I think television is a good example of what VR potentially could be, but better maybe. So I think there's going to be a lot of people who, or a certain demographic. I think the potential is there is the answer.
But football, you watch it in a bar with some beer, or at home with some beer.
Talking about photographic representations of experiences, or we're actually talking about sort of sensory.
Well,
if you're talking about having a festival experience where you don't have to pay to go, but you still feel muddy and sweaty.
So on that note, this sounds probably crazy, but there are companies working with data. So your 5 senses that you have, those are all electrical pulses that go to your brain. There are companies. This is probably beyond the scope of this panel here, but there are companies who are looking at how they can replicate taste, touch, sight, scent, etc. Where it goes straight into your brain and you can still taste it without being there.
It's getting very sci-fi.
I don't think it's VR, but it's some other acronym.
Sorry,
Adele,
can I add something to that?
Can I just,
Okay,
Adele,
yeah.
did you want to add something really quickly?
I just wanted to kind of wrap up on your question. I feel like, there's always going to be people that go to festivals and concerts because they like being part of the crowd. They like having a warm beer in their hand. They like just being there. I think, though, that on the other hand, it could make it more accessible to people that can't make it or can't afford it. And those are different categories. And I don't think it's going to mean that people are going to stop going to those events. And I also don't think that it means that we shouldn't do any of the VR stuff.
So go ahead.
Funnily enough, I think we've just touched on something that Event Huddle was talking about on Thursday, which is the influence of super influencers on social media, on the digital sphere. And there was one particular marketing guru that was saying that he does events for Birdseye particularly. And they've actually gone away from doing big public events or big marketing campaigns, which are quite expensive, to creating small, localized home parties for a brand, and then letting those super influencers use their social media influence and use their network to actually carry that message forward. So my question would be, is that something that you would recognize, that you've heard about, and do you think that could influence us as an industry, as an events industry, seeing as how we are dependent on numbers coming together, 100 people there for client entertaining, or could it go to smaller, localized events, which are then either being streamed in VR or either being shared on social media, because then there is a trusted person that promotes that particular brand rather than experiencing themselves. So you've got a trusted person tasting that food, saying, "Oh, I love this food," so therefore your neighbor is going to buy it. Do you see what I mean?
That's where video, though, I think comes into it. Like with us, a lot of the videos we have of our food, people can make their own sort of mind up and decision on that. And that's, I think that's much more powerful than someone saying, "Oh, I had this, it was amazing, it tasted like this." If they can actually see a video, the amount of the impact that has and the engagement is so powerful.
I feel like what you're talking about is it definitely touches onto this formula that's emerged, which is basically big influencer plus low cost social media campaign equals big impact for brands. And I'm not sure how that's gonna tie within the event industry that I'm evolving in, because I'm always gonna be working with a potential client and listening to what they need and delivering that. But I do agree that for smaller brands that, they want to reach a lot of people, but they don't have the typical budget that you'd need for a really big brand activation with a really special venue and the marketing kind of budget. Using people and socials is kind of the way to go. And if anything, an intimate party, which is hard to get into, but that your favorite influencer is going to be there repping this new brand, sounds more exciting than if you work for a marketing or PR company and you get hundreds of invites to different brand activations every day. That's what I would say. I don't know if that answers your questions at all, but
It does to a certain extent, but then I guess my very specific question is: do you see the number of live events going down because of a trend? And again, it ties back into VR and things. Do you see the number of live events, number of face-to-face client events going down, which is bread and butter for a lot of people, I think, in the events industry?
I don't think so. I think live events are increasing. I think the more that we're digital and the more that we communicate online, the value of face-to-face goes up.
It's an interesting dichotomy, actually, that I've noticed, because I come from just on the end of the generation when if you had a telephone at home, it stood on the hall table and it was plugged into the wall, and that was your phone at home. And I use my phone to phone people. But everybody seems to be getting incredibly insular. On my train from Waterloo every morning, most of the people are on their phones and everybody's focused on their own little space. But everybody, funnily enough, seems to want to share as well. So everybody's focused on their own little world, but they're telling everybody else about their own little world. So even though they're just all focused downwards, they're actually pushing out. So you need content. People want to tell people about stuff, but they want to be in their own little bubble as well. So it is a dichotomy. It's very odd seeing it happen when you've grown through it. Some people just arrive straight into it. Other people have seen it develop, and it's very, very odd.
Your example is because nobody knows each other around each other on the train, but they're sharing with people they know. And it used to be that we're all in our own little world in the newspaper, and you couldn't share anything from the newspaper. But now you're reading the newspaper on your phone, and you can share it.
Great. I think, do we have time for one more question, or one more quick question? Did you have one? You've been waiting a while. Sorry.
It wasn't actually a question. I just wanted to contribute because I actually have a view that VR could also help more people want to go to certain events. So, if your sister went to Glastonbury, brought a 360 camera, and then made you watch it at home, that might actually want you to go even more next year because you can actually see what went on at that event. So it can go both ways.
All right, I think we're out of time. I'm sure that everyone on the panel will be around to answer any individual questions, but I wanted to thank Emma, Julian, Adele, Richard, and Caleb, and to HireSpace for hosting the panel.